for as long as I may require.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, here's my view of serving in the United States Senate. It's hard to get here. It's hard to stay here. And while you're here, you might as well try to accomplish something good for the country. Accomplishing something good for the United States Senate, in the United States Senate, means working with a superior staff. So today I want to pay tribute to the 270 men and women who have served on my staff since I came to the Senate in 2003. In my personal office, both here and in Washington, D.C., and in 6 Tennessee offices, in the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, at the Senate Rules Committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee, at the Senate Republican Conference. Some who started with me in 2003 are still working. We're still working together after 18 years. Some have moved on to other opportunities, but each has played a major role in the Senate, whether they're helping to pass laws, serve our constituents, or answering the front office phone. We have some important traditions here in the Senate, including the maiden speech, which I delivered 17 years ago in my case, and the farewell speech, which I delivered yesterday. But for me, something is missing. Usually staff is acknowledged in the farewell address, which either makes the address way too long or it leaves too little time to properly acknowledge their contributions. So I'm here today to make a salute to the staff speech. And I know my colleagues agree that their own accomplishments are the result of working with superior staffs. So perhaps, if I may not be presumptuous, a salute to the staff speech might become an additional Senate tradition. When I say superior staff, here's what I mean. Superior in being what Senator Howard Baker used to call an eloquent listener, that the constituent on the phone might be right, or even the staffer in the other office might be right. Superior in courtesy to Tennesseans for whom we work. Superior in insight. Superior in resolving complex issues and wrapping the result up in a nice package with a ribbon tied around it, ready to be passed and signed into law whenever the moment came that it could be passed, which would usually be a surprise and at an inconvenient time. And superior in writing and speaking plain English in order to persuade at least half the people we're right. And superior in working well together, something you're supposed to learn in kindergarten, so that we have a good time while we're working. Unlike almost every other Senate office, at the suggestion of my Chief of Staff, David Cleary, we created a single team composed of personal office staff here and in Washington, D.C., and the committee staff, with David in charge of all of that. I originally thought that was a big mistake. I didn't see how anyone could be in charge of all of that, but I was wrong about it, because what it did was break down barriers, eliminate jealousy, improve communication, and create a much happier and effective working condition. The results have been exceptional. For 18 years, I've gotten up every morning thinking I might be able to do something good to help our country, and I've gone to bed most nights thinking that I have. That couldn't have happened without the privilege of working with an exceptional staff. Now, the truth of the matter is, we all know this, that there's just no physical way for any United States senator to see every single one of our constituents every time we want to see them or talk to them on the phone, although we all make our best efforts to do that. And you learn pretty quickly that constituents expect and deserve to be treated not just with courtesy, but promptly. For example, Senator Estes Kefauver held this seat that I now hold when I was a high school student. One day, Maud from Madisonville, his hometown, called Senator Kefauver's office and said, "I want to speak to Estes." The staffer said, "I'm sorry, but Senator Kefauver is tied up on the floor." There was a long silence. And Maud said, "Well, go down and untie the son of a gun and get him up off the floor and tell him Maud is on the phone and wants to speak with him." So our constituents expect to talk with us when they want to. My first visit to the Senate I was a junior in high school. It was part of the American Legion Boys Nation program. And I was invited to visit Senator Kefauver. I was 17 years old. I was reluctant to do that because I was sure he had many more important people to see than a 17-year-old boy from Maryville, Tennessee. I was even more sure of that when I arrived at his office because his office was just filled with people who looked important and looked like they'd come from all over the world to see him. But his assistant came out and swished me in through all the important people, doing her best to make me feel comfortable. Kefauver had a reputation for being accessible, and it was because his staff made it appear that he always was. I remind my staff that there are many of the people who want to see us suspect that we feel we are too important to see them, and we should do everything we can to help them understand that we know that they're the important ones. Staff and I have done our best to try to do that. With all of the senators with whom I've served from Tennessee, we have what we call Tennessee Tuesday, breakfast where any Tennessean can come and visit with both senators, have a little breakfast, and have a photograph made. In 18 years, some 270 people have worked on my Senate staff, as I mentioned, in Jackson, Nashville, Tri-Cities, Knoxville, Memphis, Chattanooga, or in Washington, D.C., or the personal staff, or the health, education, labor, and pension staff, or the Rules Committee, or the Appropriations Committee, or at the Senate Republican Conference. It's a lot of places to have a lot of staff. 153 women, 117 men. Our staff has also benefited from the work of 433 interns. Now, these interns usually stay with us 1 to 3 months, and they have some real work experiences while they're here, and they're pretty good. In fact, 30 staff members, that's 11% of our staff, began their work in our office as interns. Our staff has experienced some great personal joys. We've celebrated the birth or adoption of 30 babies over those 18 years. Just as I met my wife, Honey, while we were both working in the Senate, some of our staffers met their spouses while working on my staff, including Mackenzie Burt and Paul McKernan, Will Patterson, Catherine Knight, Virginia Hepner, Bobby McMillan, Laura Loeffler, and John Herzog, Will Campbell, Victoria Souza, Patrick Janes, and Jill Salyers. They're all married now. We also have experienced some profound sorrows. Some have lost parents, nursed seriously injured children, been through their own health emergencies. And then in November 2007, Trey Loeffler, a very special staffer and friend, was involved in a serious car accident and died as a result of his injuries. Many staff members have stayed, we've worked together for a long time. Some have been a part of our team, meaning we've worked together since I became a senator. Patrick Janes, State Director. Lindsay Seidman, Deputy Staff Director on the Help Committee. Jane Chedister, Field Representative in Knoxville. Kay Durham, Constituent Services Representative in Nashville. Charlotte Jackson, who knows more about how to help people with a visa problem than anybody in the world. Matt Verino, Field Representative in Jackson. Jenna Parkinson in Tri-Cities. Stephanie Shivers, a Senior Advisor in Nashville. It's pretty remarkable. It's not so easy to be on the staff of a United States Senator in a state they represent. Everybody knows who you are. Everywhere you go, you're likely to be sought out by people who need help, people who are hurting. It's easy to get burned out. It's hard to stay in a job like that for that long. Patrick Janes says that while these might be jobs in politics, the politics end when you start the job. You've got to work with everyone and help everyone. Our Tennessee field representatives have traveled thousands of miles, meeting with mayors and businesses and schools, hospitals, other organizations across our 95 counties. Caseworkers, they've handled about 20,000 cases over the years. Disability benefits, helping a World War II veteran get a medal, helping a family stranded overseas get home. For example, Laura Ray Goodrich is a staffer in Jackson. She heard of a single mother who was having desperate issues getting tax refund. The mother needed the money to help pay rent and the rest of her bills. Laura Ray got to work, reached out to the IRS. She discovered the mother's returns had been wrong for several years and helped the thrilled single mother recover far more money than she was expecting. Or Keith Abraham, who works in the Knoxville office, heard from a Tennessee company about an employee with a grim cancer diagnosis. The employee's parents lived in China. They weren't unable to see the employee because of COVID restrictions. Well, long and short, Keith worked it out so they could receive the appropriate paperwork and fly here to be with their daughter. One story that I got to see in person was about Wilbur Bill Hoffman from World War II. Mary Wooldridge in our Memphis office was asked if there was some way he could be recognized for his World War II service. And she worked with the services and discovered that he was not only eligible for a Purple Heart, he'd been wounded at Point du Hoc on D-Day in 1944. He had also earned the Bronze Star and the Ranger Tab Awards. So in 2012, he was presented with these awards by our state's highest-ranking military officer, General Haston, at a ceremony I attended. He died a year later. Each fall, Kay Durham in our office works through about 150 Tennesseans' applications to attend our nation's service academies. She's worked with over 2,500 candidates applying for those academies. There's no better state director than Patrick Janes. He's also served as deputy chief of staff. He's worked to create a smooth relationship between what happens in Tennessee and what happens here. I've traveled thousands of miles with Patrick. He's not run into anybody, but we've been through a lot of flat tires and some speeding tickets. Patrick and I have seen it all. He's full of insights. He's got energy for the next event. He can always solve a problem. During my time in the Senate, the conference elected me 3 times as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. Now that's a little bit of a political job. What you're supposed to do is come up with something that Republicans can say to counter what Democrats are saying. And it's especially a challenge to do that for Republicans, to get them to talk on a single message. All of the senators, every one of us, are experts in politics, or we wouldn't have gotten here, and Republican senators are especially independent-minded. Republicans and Democrats will often all do things together as a caucus, but we do it differently than they do it. Democrats will all hold hands and jump off the cliff together. Republicans will also all jump off the cliff at the same time, but one will do a somersault, one will do a backflip, one will do a dive, and so forth. The goal was to come up in the caucus with a catchy phrase. For example, on energy, find more, use less. Or about Obamacare, step by step instead of conservative. To persuade senators to say the same thing, staff would record clips of them saying what I thought they should say, and then we'd show that back to them at lunch. I found that senators paid a lot more attention to watching themselves say things than they did to watching me suggest to them what to say. Now, it wasn't me doing all that, it was the staff doing it. They came up with the catchy phrases, many of them. They made sure we were communicated them at the conference. While I was on the Rules Committee, I had a chance. I worked with Senator Schumer on that. We were ranking. A little bit like this year, we didn't know who would be the new president. So I had an opportunity to speak at President Obama's inauguration. I talked about the peaceful transfer or the reaffirmation of power as a conspicuous symbol of our democracy. There's no possible way to organize a presidential inauguration without a superior staff. Mary Jones and Lindsay Seidman were the ones who were in charge of all that for us. And then in 2012, on the Senate Help Committee, as the senior Republican for 2 years and then 6 years as chairman, the staff grew a lot. Senator Ted Kennedy used to say that the Help Committee had about 1/3 of the jurisdiction of the Senate. It certainly does a lot of work, and it needs a lot of talented staff members. During my 8 years as the senior Republican, the staff helped organize 209 hearings, 752 witnesses, mostly bipartisan, meaning that I agreed with Senator Harkin first, Senator Murray the last 6 years on who the witnesses would be, and we produced 90 bills that have become law. It's a lot of work, weeks of work by the staff. Securing each witness often takes a host of conversations with Democrat committee staff numerous phone calls with experts. And every bill that becomes law takes efforts that are hard to comprehend outside the walls of Congress. From the consultations with constituents and experts, to the drafting, to work with other members or outside groups, to consulting, to trying to soothe bruised feelings, to work with other committee members, bring it to the attention of the majority leader, try to find an opportunity for it to be on the Senate calendar, then build support, then remove holds. There's a lot of work to do in passing a bill and making a law, and staff do most of the work. Senators do a lot, but they can't do it all. Here's some of the achievements worth highlighting. I mentioned many of them yesterday in my farewell address, so I won't go into great detail about them today. But for example, the Every Student Succeeds Act. This was the bill to fix No Child Left Behind. It affects 50 million children in 100,000 schools. President Obama called it a Christmas miracle. The Wall Street Journal said it was the biggest devolution of power from Washington to the states in 25 years. I'll never forget what for me was a truly emotional moment when every senator on our committee, now this is from Rand Paul to Elizabeth Warren, voted to recommend the bill to the Senate. This law was the result of complicated and nimble work by Peter Oppenheim, Lindsey Fryer, Matt Stern, and David Cleary. FAFSA simplification. 20 million Americans fill out this ridiculously complex form for federal aid for Pell Grants and student loans. You've seen me hold it up on the Senate floor. Everyone agrees it can be 33 instead of 108 questions, and almost everyone agrees it's the major obstacle to low-income students getting federal aid to go to college because they're intimidated by it. Well, Bob Moran, Lauren Davis, and Andrew Lacasse have worked hard with Senator Murray's staff, and we've gotten it about half done, and we'd like to get it across the finish line before the end of the year. Head Start, in 2007, we came up with the idea, Sarah Rittling was the staffer, for 200 centers of excellence for the Head Start program. Then in 2005, Katrina came, and Rita came, two big hurricanes, and Kristen Bannerman was critical to legislation where we worked with Senator Kennedy, Senator Dodge, Senator Landrieu for voucher funding to assist the cost of educating 150,000 public and non-public school students in grades K through 12 who were displaced by the hurricane. And then reauthorizing the Perkins Act, a watershed moment, Education Week said it was. Staffer Jake Baker worked on that. Senator Enzi did a lot of the heavy work. I've been fortunate to have two extraordinary women who I work with run the team on the Health Committee handling health policy, Mary Sumter Lipinski and Grace Graham. And under those exceptions, well, before they started, Melissa Paff and Paige Cranbull and Marguerite Salih Kondracki were instrumental in passing the Preemie Act in 2003, getting the bill well written and signed into law to help working with the March of Dimes to help there be more healthy babies live long and healthy lives. But once I became senior on the Help Committee, we began to work on the 21st Century Cures Act. Senator McConnell said it was the most important law of that Congress. It helps speed medical miracles to patients and doctors' offices. Margaret Coulter, Andy Vogt, Melissa Paff, Brett Meeks, and others spent countless hours getting ready for that. FDA user fees. Grace Graham's ability as a traffic cop, working with Senator Murray's staff and with the House committees, had a really fairly seamless effort to take these complicated pieces of law to collect user fees from drug and device makers and include significant new provisions to speed those drugs and devices into doctors' offices. The most popular bill that never became law was called Alexander Murray. I even bought a case of scotch called Alexander Murray to give out to everybody when it was passed, but it never was passed. The result of the immense efforts, the whole goal was to reduce the cost of health care premiums in the individual insurance market. President Trump worked well with us on that. Virginia McMillan and Liz Rowe did countless hours of work, but we couldn't quite get it across the finish line. Then this year there was the Shark Tank. Senator Blunt, with Senator Shelby's support, We worked together with Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health to create an initiative, $2.5 billion, to produce 50 million more COVID diagnostic tests a month than current technologies would do. Grace Graham, Melissa Paff, Laura Friedel, on Senator Blunt's staff, worked on that. During all this, Grace Graham was in her third trimester, not all of it, but during the latter part of this was in her third trimester. She was working on designs, being the traffic cop between here and the House, and today she and her husband Stash have their first child, Penn. She's back at work, and the country's better off for everything that she's contributed. Our committee leadership positions are often considered the plum positions, but you can do a whole lot with a talented personal staff. Ours have put in long hours and met expectations. For example, on the Great American Outdoors Act, Anna Newton and Lindsay Garcia did yeoman work. This is a bill good people had literally been trying to pass since the Eisenhower years. It's the most important piece of outdoor legislation in that period of time. And then the Music Modernization Act, we worked with Senator Hatch and his staff. We eventually got 85 co-sponsors, but this one nearly ran off the road several times. Lindsay Garcia and Paul McKernan made sure it became law. The America Competes Act, that was back in my early years as a senator when I was very junior, so I got the Republican leader and the Democratic leader to co-sponsor it, and it passed with, I think, more than 60 co-sponsors to improve our competitive position in the world. Matt Sonneson and David Cleary were the key staffers on that. They're not just working with staff people around here. For example, in the American Competes Act, the bill wouldn't have passed if it hadn't been for 800 outdoor recreation and environmental groups outside of Congress who supported the bill and encouraged senators to get off planes and come back in here and cast crucial votes. We're grateful for that.